For being so late.
That's fine, that's fine.
It's probably appropriate for me to correct one thing that Artemis said. I have screwed up all my life. And I think that's been a really important part of doing the things I've done, because I always tell kids three things. I tell them always, study hard, work hard, and don't be afraid of failure. And I do believe that. I think through failure, we frequently end up in a lot better place than we would have been if everything worked right. So if I have time, I'll tell you about Hoots Law. Hoots Law is a very good thing for everybody to remember on what happens that helps you screw up. But I want to thank you all again very much for allowing me to come back and be with this group. I want to thank the folk at Explore Mars Incorporated for bringing us all together today, along with the gracious host here at the George Washington University who offer us the facilities each year and allow us to get together. It's great to join you again for another Humans to Mars Summit. You'll be hearing from a lot of people, a number of my NASA colleagues during the course of this summit. In fact, later this morning, there's a phenomenal leadership panel scheduled with Bill Gerstenmaier, and who leads our human exploration efforts, John Grunsfeld, who runs our Science Mission Directorate, and Steve Jerzik, who runs space technology at NASA. And I see two of them down here already, so unlike me, they're on time. One of the reasons that we're such enthusiastic participants in this conference is that we strongly believe that it's important to raise the public's awareness about our nation's journey to Mars. There's great value in reminding our neighbors that landing astronauts on the red planet isn't just a pipe dream or merely something you see in the movies or read about in the comic books. It's the culmination of years of planning and work and discovery and dreaming. And yes, at times, discussion and debate, and that's what this summit is all about. Just so you know, although I never dreamed of being an astronaut growing up, I did spend almost every Saturday in either the Carver Theater or the Capitol Theater in Columbia, South Carolina, up in the balcony, which was where we had to go sit. But I'd watch Flash Gordon and Lash LaRue. No one will remember Lash LaRue. He was a cowboy with a whip. Flash Gordon, though, was the guy that could run out to the launch pad, walk into his spaceship, and blast off to Mars routinely. And so that's what I, like every other young man of my age, and this was back in the early 50s, that's what I thought was going to happen by the time I grew up. So this is not something that I come to new or lightly. I believed it then, and I believe it even more strongly now. So let me take this opportunity to thank you for what you're doing to remind our neighbors, both here in the U.S. and around the world, that the journey to Mars is real. It's attainable, and it matters to humanity and the pursuit of human progress. When folks would ask the British explorer George Leigh Mallory why he chose to climb Mount Everest, somebody else used this, as a matter of fact, that you will remember, he used to answer simply, because it's there. You and I know that we choose to go to Mars for a much deeper and profound reason. When President Kennedy used that at Rice University, he said, you know, why do we climb Mount Everest? Because it's there. Why does Rice play Texas? Why does the Naval Academy play he didn't say this, I did. Why does the Naval Academy play Notre Dame? Because every once in a while you win. I could say that about Mars, but I won't, because today that's not good enough. It was good enough in the 60s because we had an arch rival who put the fear of God in us and made us think that there was certain end to the world. We don't have that anymore, and so we have to come up with much better reasons than because it's there. I'm sure many in this room can recite these reasons in their sleep, but I'm going to repeat a few of them anyway, because as Martin Luther King Jr. is purported to have said, sometimes it's important to preach to the choir. Otherwise, they might stop singing. So I want you to repeat after me. Okay, seriously, I want you to repeat after me. Mars matters. Mars matters. Okay, you don't have to repeat anymore. But its formulation and evolution are comparable to Earth's. Mars matters because we know that at one time it had conditions suitable for life. Mars matters because what we learn about the red planet may tell us more about our own home planet's history and future, and because it might help us, just help us unravel the age-old mystery about whether life exists beyond Earth. Mars matters. Because Mars matters, we've embarked on a journey to the red planet. It's a journey NASA's actually began not 4 weeks, 4 months, or even 4 years ago. It's a journey we've been on for the better part of 4 decades, actually a little bit more than that. It is my firm belief that we are closer to getting there today than we've ever been before in the history of human civilization. As a result, we are on pace to reach the goal that President Obama articulated 5 years ago at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, to send American astronauts to Mars in the 2030s. There is a new consensus that's emerging around this timetable and around this goal. There is also a consensus emerging around NASA's plan for going there. This plan is clear, this plan is affordable, and this plan is sustainable. Over the course of this conference, you'll be hearing a lot about reviews and studies of our journey to Mars, including a new one done by the Jet Propulsion Lab, which further validates NASA's plan for putting American boots on Martian soil by the 2030s. Each of these studies, including the JPL review that you'll hear more about tomorrow, concludes that there are certain critical elements needed to carry out a journey to Mars. The JPL study says there are 6 building blocks needed, things like the Space Launch System, the Orion Crew Module, a deep space habitat, along with new technologies like solar electric propulsion. I'm pleased to report that work is already underway at NASA on 4 of the 6 critical elements, and the 5th, advanced propulsion, is being moved forward through an innovative partnership with American industry that we call Next Step. In fact, today we're releasing details about the projects we're working on with a dozen industry partners at www.nasa.gov/nextstep. Other elements needed to advance our journey to Mars can be accomplished in conjunction with other commercial and international partners. With this in mind, I thought I'd run through a few of the key elements of our plan, starting with robotic exploration, building upon the progress we've already been making and making for decades, dating back to Mariner 4's flyby in July 1965. America is still, and I remind everybody in this audience, I know everybody in here is not an American citizen, but still, America is still the only nation to successfully land a spacecraft on Mars. When our latest Mars spacecraft, Maven, arrived last September to study the red planet's upper atmosphere, it joined a fleet of our orbiters and rovers that we already had on the surface, and we have had on the surface since Viking 1 and 2 landed in the 1970s. Next year, we will send the InSight lander to study the planet's core, and in 2020, a new rover called Mars 2020 will build on the success of Curiosity and help us prepare for human arrival at Mars. And for the first time ever, it will cache a sample for later return to Earth. We're also working with our European partners on ExoMars, their mission to search for biosignatures of Martian life. We're providing several components for the ExoMars orbiter that is set to launch in 2016, as well as the rover that will launch in 2018. So robotic exploration is an important part of this, and so too is human exploration. It has to be if the end goal is putting American feet on the surface of Mars. The human journey to deep space begins in low Earth orbit aboard the International Space Station. In March, I had the opportunity to attend the launch of American astronaut Scott Kelly and his Russian cosmonaut counterpart Mikhail Kornienko into space as they began their historic one-year journey in space. It'll be the first time an American astronaut will live and work in space for an entire year, and it's an important stepping stone on our journey to Mars. Scott joined a team of dedicated American astronauts who aboard the ISS are helping us learn how to safely execute extended missions deeper into space. The human research will help us prepare for long-duration crews, while other experiments help us better understand things like habitability, how much space a crew needs for a long-duration mission. Now, as for ISS, we are guaranteed this unique orbiting outpost for at least another decade by President Obama's commitment to extend the ISS until at least 2024. And I'm pleased to say that recently our Russian partners and Canadian partners have agreed to support us in the extension to 2024. This means an expanded market for private space companies, more groundbreaking research and science discovery in microgravity, and opportunities to live, work, and learn in space over longer periods of time. As most of you know, we've already returned cargo resupply missions for the ISS to the United States. And the result is that we're insourcing jobs and creating a whole new private market in low Earth orbit. The next step is commercial crew launch capability. Just a few weeks ago, astronauts aboard the space station undertook 3 highly successful spacewalks. They were helping configure the station to accept commercial vehicles that are currently being developed by Boeing and SpaceX. In just a couple of years, these vehicles will transport American and partner nation astronauts to the station from American soil. Our next step is deep space, where NASA will send the first mission to capture and redirect an asteroid to orbit the moon. Astronauts aboard the Orion spacecraft will explore the asteroid in the 2020s, returning to Earth with samples. This experience in human spaceflight beyond low Earth orbit will help NASA test new systems and capabilities, such as advanced high-power solar electric propulsion we'll need to support a human mission to Mars. To get to deep space, we're continuing to develop Orion and the Space Launch System rocket. Recently, we fired up the largest, most powerful booster ever built in a ground test for SLS at the Orbital ATK facility in Utah. As for Orion, when the President laid out his vision for the journey to Mars at the Kennedy Space Center, he stood in front of a mock-up of Orion and pledged that the spacecraft would be readied for flight in the years ahead. This past December, Orion had a highly successful test flight that took it farther into space than any spacecraft built for human passengers has flown in more than 4 decades. When she returned home, she brought with her critical data that we'll be able to use as we plan future crewed missions to deep space. Meanwhile, because technology drives exploration, engineers and scientists around the country are working hard to develop the technologies astronauts will use to one day live and work on Mars and safely return home, from spacesuits to habitats, to advances like low-density supersonic decelerators that will allow heavier spacecraft to land safely on places like Mars. In order to pioneer space, as President Obama put it, to push out into the solar system, not just to visit, but to stay, these new technologies are critically important. The further we advance and learn and discover, the more our technologies will need to evolve, be upgraded, and grow. They are what will allow us to establish a sustainable human presence on Mars. The great news is that in many cases, technological advances are twofers or threefers, because they also provide spin-off benefits and create high-paying jobs here on Earth. In short, we're firmly on a journey to Mars, and we're counting on you to join us. Many of you already have. As President Obama said, and I quote, "Our goal is the capacity for people to work and learn and operate and live safely beyond Earth for extended periods of time, ultimately in ways that are more sustainable and even indefinite. And in fulfilling this task, we will not only extend humanity's reach in space, we will strengthen America's leadership here on Earth," unquote. Thank you for joining us here today and tomorrow for this summit, and thank you for the courage of your convictions and for spreading the word about the possibility and the promise that flow from our journey to Mars. I wish all of you the best throughout this summit and beyond. So thank you, and I think I managed to finish in time to, can I take a couple of questions? Okay, I hope the person who said yes is authoritative. I will take that as a yes. And, okay, so why don't I try? Does this work? Does this work? Yes, it works. Okay, questions. I'll come out here where I can see. I couldn't see anything back there. Who said yes? Okay, did yes have a question? Oh, yes, I can take questions. Okay. Doug, are you scratching your head or you got a question? Doug's scratching his head. There's a question back there on the aisle. If you want to, I'll repeat it just in case so you can get your question out before they give me the hook. And then, what's your name? Okay.
How it's possible to do in the current situation.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will summarize his question. I think most people heard it. He said in the current environment, I mentioned international partnership. How do we plan to partner with the Russians, and how do we do that in the current environment? You know, we have a great partnership with Roscosmos. We have had that now for since the mid-90s, late 80s. And in spite of the political and diplomatic furor between our countries, the technical and scientific cooperation between Roscosmos and the U.S. continues, and it continues to be very strong. When I was in Baikonur for Scott Kelly's launch, I had my first meeting with Oleg Komarov, who is my counterpart with the Russian Space Agency, Roscosmos. He is now in a position where he oversees the vast majority of everything in the Russian space program. So he has everything from rockets to human space flight to institutes, biomedical institutes and the like. And when I told you that the Russians had announced that they were going to partner with us, continue to partner with us until at least 24 on the International Space Station, that came publicly from Mr. Komarov when we had a press conference after the successful launch of Scott and his crew. And it kind of put things back on the right path after a lot of back and forth about the Russians were going to pull out and we were going to do this and everything else. The partnership is still strong, and we continue to work. Some of you may know that the Russians are partnered with ESA on ExoMars. We're partnered with ESA on ExoMars. The Russians have a radiation vehicle on Curiosity. That partnership is strong. And so I think almost everyone in the diplomatic arena, in the political arena, recognizes the critical importance of the International Space Station. And so you find that the International Space Station is semi-exempt from a lot of the diplomatic wranglings for right now. We just have to be careful and make sure that we continue to progress the way we have before. Okay? Question over there.
Thank you.
And then over here. And then Frank.
Jeff Landis of NASA Glenn. I agree with you that new technologies for power, propulsion, and spaceflight are critical for human exploration of Mars. The difficulty has been, it has always been hard to get the technologies, of which there's plenty, there's many technologies, but getting them into space and demonstrated has always been the stumbling block. That seems to be due to the fear of failure. Nobody wants to fly a technology for the first time. They're all afraid that it might fail. So how do we avoid that problem? How do we avoid this valley of death between the laboratory and in-flight demonstration?
Steve Jerzik is smiling down there like he's probably going to answer this question when he comes up for his panel. But let me take issue with what you said. I don't think the number one problem, fear of failure is a problem. The number one problem is not fear of failure, it's funding. And it is the refusal to put any money into advanced technologies recently. And what we have done to try to turn that around, I mentioned next steps. You know, we are, feeble as it may be, we just announced 6 grants that we are awarding for studies. Some of them are studies in advanced propulsion. We have another one that the Space Technology Mission Directorate is getting ready to put out, that we're looking for advanced propulsion that is related to human space flight only, not cargo. So we're not talking about advanced Hall thrusters or advanced solar electric propulsion that lasts a long time and takes a year to get some. We're talking about increased speed. And so we're going to make modest investments, but nonetheless investments. And I think if we fund it, people here who do research are willing to take the chance at failure. They can't even take the chance at failure if we don't fund it. But you're absolutely right. All I can do as the NASA administrator is say it's okay to fail. Good point. It's not okay not to try. Okay. Question here, then Frank, then here. All right.
Good morning, sir. Do you see any coupling between mining asteroids, planetary defense, and some of the programs you need for human exploration? What do you envision? How do you envision that coupling proceeding?
Yeah, we do. As a matter of fact, and this is a point of great contention. In fact, the next speaker may even talk about the point of great contention. We have been advised to cease and desist on the asteroid redirect mission by some experts in the world. That's fine. However, we believe that the asteroid redirect mission does a number of things. And I try to remind people of how we got here in the first place. There are a number of things we're trying to do. We really are trying to demonstrate that we can develop the technologies and techniques to help commercial companies, entrepreneurs, other people get to asteroids so that they can mine them or they can explore them. And that's what we want to do. We believe that by demonstrating that by using the asteroid redirect mission as a vehicle to demonstrate high-powered solar electric propulsion, we advance the need for solar electric propulsion that will be required to get things to Mars. Do we have to use an asteroid to do that? No. But if you're going to do that, and as the NASA Advisory Council told us, no matter what you do, no matter whether you downscope, descope, whatever, you cannot stop the effort to develop high energy solar electric propulsion. So if that is a requirement, then why not put it to use for something that does the third thing we're trying to do, which is respond to demands from the Congress. You all don't go to hearings like I do. You go to hearings, but not like I do. And it is emblazed in my brain. All the congressmen have now forgotten it. But about 2 or 3 years ago, I had a very exciting hearing, and I have told people over and over and over, it was the most substantive hearing in which I have ever participated, and it was one that Chairman Lamar Smith convened, brought Willie Shelton, General Shelton, John Holdren, and me to task about near-Earth objects and asteroids. And we got beat up about what are we going to do if we know that an asteroid is inbound to Earth and is going to threaten civilization. And the answer that all three of us gave him was, at this time, nothing. We don't have a capability. And I made the statement, we don't have a capability because this nation has not invested in the technologies needed to do that. We now have decided we're going to invest in the technologies. We are not going to save the planet. Please understand me, okay? But we are going to inform people who will follow us after we demonstrate through the asteroid redirect mission that you can, in fact, do something that many people didn't think was possible. And you can move something that is God-made and is headed around the sun, and you can deflect it ever so slightly. If we can do that and we get it into a stable lunar orbit, we will have done something that is dramatically informative for humanity and may lead to the development of sustainable technologies that will then be able to save the planet. So remember, I didn't say we're going to save the planet. We're not about that. So there are a number of things we're trying to do with the asteroid redirect mission. People want to go back to, okay, if it doesn't get you to Mars, then don't do it. Well, I've got other things I'm trying to do, like help people save the planet. So I think we're okay. All right. Question, Frank?
Thank you, Charlie. It's Frank Mooring with Aviation Week.
Yeah.
NASA has a very definite approach to getting humans back on Mars. JPL has a variant of that approach. And a lot of your international partners, particularly the European Space Agency, would like to go to the moon first. How does the international spacefaring community reconcile these different approaches and
Yeah.
different goals and different timetables?
You know, I want everybody to bear with me here, okay? Some of you remember, I think we called it what was it called? Variable path? Flexible path. You all used to believe that there are thousands of ways to do things, and you should evaluate as many of those thousands of ways to do things before you settle on something. And people get upset because when I say we have a plan, our plan is incremental. We are working on one way that we believe you can get humans to Mars. We have still not given up on some of those alternative ways that may become possible if you throw things into the game that aren't there yet. If all of a sudden somebody miraculously discovered a propulsion system that would get humans to Mars in 4 months, that might dramatically alter the course on which we're currently embarked. So, you know, I believe that working with our international partners the way we have, what I tell all of them is we are going to cislunar space. We're going to be in orbit around the moon for a period of about 10 years, the period of the 20s. That is not the dead decade. That is a critical decade in which we're going to do continued technology development, continue to find out more about the human body and how we sustain it in a hostile environment of being away from gravity. We're going to learn a lot of things there. At that time, it is very easy for somebody who has the wherewithal, the desire, and the funds to build a lander to descend from lunar orbit to the surface of the moon. So I have to remind people, we never left the moon. The U.S. and our partners never left the moon. We've had experiments recently, whether it's LADI or on and on and on, that are still looking at the moon, the environment of the moon, because we believe it's valuable. People talk about in situ resource development or ISRU. You know, the moon is still a potential source for material that will make the journey to Mars easier. It's just that I am one who believes that if your goal becomes the moon and you say we'll go on from there to Mars one day, then one day never comes. I still say what I said at the beginning of my remarks. Today we are closer to putting humans on Mars than in the history of human civilization. We are just a few years away from being inside 20 years to the feasibility, realistic feasibility of putting humans on Mars. Now that may not be a big deal to some of you. It's a big deal to me because I have spent my entire life being 20 to 30 years away from going to Mars. And I think we're incredibly closer today. So anyway, I think there was one, yes. Last question, okay. Hoots Law, what's Hoots Law? This was when I was a young snotty-nosed astronaut, and I was on my training for my first mission. I was the pilot, the co-pilot for the Venerable Hoot Gibson, who is one of two people who wear spaceships and airplanes and stuff. They don't get in them. And so Hoot was my commander, and we were flying a simulation, an ascent simulation one day. Wayne Hill's sitting down there. Wayne probably was trying to train me too. At one time I thought I was going to be untrainable. Shuttle was really complex and complicated, and the pilot had all kinds of stuff to do. And I went to Hoot one day and I said, this stuff is not coming as rapidly as I thought it would be, and I'm really worried. He said, oh, don't worry about it, relax, it'll all come to you. I see Kent down here and John Grunsfeld. They never had this problem. I did. He said, it'll come to you, don't worry about it. And so I said, okay. So I got in the simulator one day for an ascent simulation, and I really wanted to impress my crew. And so we lifted off, gong, gong, gong. We get an alarm. It's an electrical problem. I look over. It's a bus short. I diagnosed it. Anyway, that would be simple if there were only one bus or two buses in the space shuttle. We had, I don't know how many, tons of buses, usually 3 of every kind. And so I said, okay, based on my analysis, we've got a, I don't know, AB1 or something. Was there such a bus? Okay. It's an AB1 bus short. So I go over and I reach the switch to take the bus AB1 offline so we don't short into something else. And we'd already lost one engine, and so I shut that one down, and the simulator got really quiet. because I had shut down a good bus that took down the second of 3 engines. We are now early in the mission, and we start sliding back into the ocean. And as we lay there dead in the Atlantic Ocean, I felt about that big, and Hoot looked at me and he said, "Charles?" I knew I was in trouble. That was like my mother calling me Charles Frank when I was growing up. He said, "Did I ever teach you Hoot's Law?" I said, "No, Hoot, you didn't." He said, "No matter how bad things are, you can always make them worse." So from that, our crew adopted a policy that no single person would ever touch any switch until at least 2 people in the crew agreed on the diagnosis, since you can always make it worse. And in shuttle, anything that you were going to survive, I can't think of very many things that required an instantaneous response. And that's why anytime in real flight, when you call the ground, it didn't make any difference how bad it was. Usually the ground said stand by. And it was because they had a lot of smart people who were looking at a lot of data, had been watching it for days in most cases, and knew that you were going to get this alarm. And if they didn't tell you in time to expect this alarm and it came off, then they would tell you, just be patient, don't do anything, because if you do the wrong thing, you can make it worse. So I would say, going back to the question about risk, and you know what else was said, the wrong thing today would be to do nothing. The wrong thing today would to become timid and say, we don't know exactly how to get to Mars. Well, we know enough. And so the right thing is to take the risk and stay the course and press on. Because if we go back to doing what we usually do, which is to say, I don't like that course, let's try another one, instead of starting out and modifying your route as you go, rather than going back to the beginning where you face certain death and the end of any hope of getting to Mars. If I leave you with no other message, it's stay the course, make small course corrections as we go, and we'll get there. If we try to go back and start all over, trust me, there are enough people sitting in this room who have been to this show before. If we go back and try to start all over now, we are toast. We are history. And human space flight and any hope of getting humans to Mars in the lifetime of anybody here. How old are you? 11 years old. We don't have enough time for her as an 11-year-old to recover if we screw up and try to start all over again. Excuse me for using that word. Tell your mom and dad, that's all right. What's your name? Katie, are you going to Mars? Please say yes. I promise we're going to bring you back. You have faith in us, or you're here to find out? Checking us out? Where do you go to school? Stony Point? Oh, in North Carolina. What part? Excuse me. You can throw me off. What part of North Carolina? What? Fayetteville. Is your mom or dad or are your mom or dad in the Army or military? Hey, fantastic. Have faith, okay? We're going to get there. Thanks for bringing all the way up from Fayetteville. I'll answer your question later. Thank you all very much. I got to go.